It's an exclusive interview. Mr. Flickster. Hello, world. It's Mr. Flickster, and I just love talking motion pictures.
Today, I have a very special interview with filmmaker Dan Mirvish, and he's going to discuss his new film, 18 and a half. So without further ado, I'm going to bring him on. How are you, Dan?
Yeah, great. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Real quick, do you want to just do a quick little overview about what your new film's about?
Sure. 18 and a half, that's the name of the film, is about it's set in 1974, and it's about a young woman who's a transcriber in the Nixon White House, and she gets a hold of the missing 18 and a half minute gap from the Nixon Watergate tapes and tries to leak it to a reporter, but they run afoul of hippies, swingers, and nefarious people out to get them. That's the very short version.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I reviewed the film myself, and I submitted it to horrorbut.com. I gave it a positive review, though, so I did enjoy it. I thought it was a very intriguing premise. So I'm curious, have you always been into politics?
Kind of, yeah. I wound up majoring in history and political science in college. Partially because my school didn't have a film program, so I did kind of a little bit of film, during school, but majored in history and poli sci. But I remember, when I was 5 years old, campaigning for McGovern around the neighborhood, so yeah, I think my background goes back pretty far as far as an interest in politics. And I'm from Omaha, and Gerald Ford was born in Omaha, so we're like, oh my gosh, the president's from Omaha. That's cool. So
I didn't know that is cool.
Yeah. So definitely goes back. And then I spent, about 2 years in Washington after first during an internship in college. And then after college, I got a job first as a journalist and then as a speechwriter to Senator Tom Harkin from Iowa. And so I did that for about a year and a half. And then I decided to go to film school, got to graduate film school. But yeah, once you have that bug, it's hard to let it go completely.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing. I didn't know that about Gerald Ford. Let me ask you this. Would you consider yourself to be a conspiracy theorist?
No, no, not at all. Not at all. I like creating conspiracies where they don't exist, but I'm not a conspiracy theorist myself. I think having worked in Washington, you realize that most things that people might think of as conspiracies are, in reality, everyone's human. The conspiracies are mainly caused because most people working in Washington or anyplace else or business, just don't get involved with things. And then what it allows is one or two people who are very aggressive about whatever agenda they happen to be going for to do whatever the thing is, whether it's Iran-Contra or Watergate. And then the rest of it, the thing about Watergate was it was always the cover-up that was the problem. There were only a few people really doing, the dirty tricks, but then it was the cover-up just got more and more people involved. So yeah, it really did. But this film, touches on a few interesting conspiracies, and all of them are actually weirdly based on fact. We have this whole weird ITT Wonder Bread conspiracy in the film. ITT really did own Wonder Bread in the early 70s. And once I found, which I don't think people realized at the time, like that is not a conspiracy theory that we found any contemporaneous acknowledgement of. But retroactively, it makes perfect sense that people would think of it as something nefarious because they really did own Wonder Bread. And ITT was really enmeshed in a scandal with Nixon that was poised to be a bigger scandal than Watergate. It was already headline news when Watergate was happening. That would have been the thing that Nixon was remembered for as scandals go. And then Watergate just took it over. So people kind of forget about it, but it was a big thing at the time. Yeah.
That's so interesting. I find the whole story, that's one of the things I liked about the film. You do different perspectives, but you don't necessarily pander to the audience with your personal opinion or anything like that. And that's what I feel like artists should do. They should pose the questions, not specifically like give the answers or try to some filmmakers, I'm not going to name names, do that more recent one, and I don't like it. Not everything has to be woke. You know what I mean? Like it's nice that you let people think for themselves. You respect the audience that way.
Thank you. Thank you.
So do you have any weird or funny stories, like fly in the wall moments that happened during filming that you care to share?
Well, the biggest thing was that we started shooting on March 3rd, 2020. What could possibly go wrong in March of 2020? and so we found out on about our 10th day of shooting that we were pretty much the last feature film shooting in North America. Everyone else had shut down, but we were so remote. We were 3 hours away from New York, 20-minute walk from the closest town. So we really were only getting these kind of sporadic reports of this, coming pandemic. And so, and then we had to shut down, then the next day, on our 11th day, and we still had 4 days left to shoot. So, and nobody likes to shut down a movie in the middle of it because you never know if you're coming back. And certainly then, we didn't know if we'd be alive, much less coming back. But, but we did what we needed to do. We shut down. A third of our crew wound up staying at the Silver Sands. We were all, which was this motel in Greenport, New York. And they just stayed there. They were afraid to go back to New York. And so they stayed there and camped out. And, we had done a product placement deal with Omaha Steaks. And you kind of see them carrying the Omaha Steaks logo in the film. And so for 2 months, they just subsisted on product placement steak and coffee from Conscious Coffee and Boulder, which was another sponsor, and product placement beer. And then our cinematographer wound up staying for all 6 months. And then we went back there after 6 months, after we took a healthy hiatus or pandemic pause. And then I had to go back. Meanwhile, I'd been baking sourdough the whole time. And I smuggled my sourdough starter back into New York. I had to do a 2-week quarantine. So I started baking sourdough for the cast and crew during those last 4 days of production. And they loved it. And by the way, there is a line about sourdough in the film that was written way before the pandemic even hit.
Okay, that's funny. I picked up on that. Said that.
Yeah, so it was a little bit life imitating art.
That's hilarious. I love stories like that.
Yeah.
What do you think the audience likes to watch these days?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think the pandemic sort of got people into the habit of watching, streaming, networks, and because of that, a lot of episodic streaming series. As opposed to individual feature films. But I think there's starting to be some backlash to it. I think people are realizing a lot of these series that you see on the Netflixes and Amazons kind of probably started as feature films. And then they just, in the development process, they just got these narratives stretched. And so you're watching these, 8-episode limited series and you're like, that probably could have been a feature film or, a 2-night series thing. It didn't need to be 8 episodes, but that's just kind of where the business has been dragging filmmakers and creative types into that world. And I think, and you saw this kind of retrenchment with Netflix, just losing stock value a couple of weeks ago. And I think there's a little bit of reaction now against that. And so I'm hoping that people will kind of go back and start reappreciating, especially as theaters open up, as we're doing our theatrical release, certainly this summer. I think people will start to kind of hopefully reappreciate the, 90-minute to 2-hour, standalone feature film. Not everything has to be world building and a series and an IP, and a Marvel movie either. So, yeah.
It's interesting you say that too, because I noticed even a lot of movie stars that used to be like big blockbuster headliners, even they're going to the streaming services with the television shows. So the whole idea of like what a movie star is has really changed nowadays. Wouldn't you agree with that?
100%. And there's some practical problems with it, because it used to be like if a movie star was doing a TV series or something, there were always, these gaps in their schedule, the summer hiatus, or even just weekend gaps where you could grab them for, hey, do you want to do a little cameo in my indie film? And they'd be shooting in LA and you could just grab them for a day, or, they're on a sitcom. It's like, oh, can we get you this afternoon or something like that? And it was no problem. Now the problem is that they're kind of locked into these Netflix series for 4 months, 6 months, or shooting up in Vancouver or wherever. And especially with the COVID rules, they can't just bounce around from set to set. It's just that's not allowed. yeah, nobody's going to allow that anymore because you've got these bubbles. And so I think that's become a real problem with casting independent films, because you still have a lot of actors that would love to do that, but they just physically can't do it right now.
Speaking of cast, how did you go about selecting your cast for this film? Because I noticed there's a lot of interesting choices, a lot of familiar faces. Like, some of them I didn't recognize the names right away, but when I saw them, I'm like, oh, that person.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
How did you choose the people that you did?
Well, Richard Kind is the one that I knew. He also was in my last film, Bernard and Huey. And his part, Jack, was kind of written a little bit with him in mind specifically, although he's so busy. I never knew for sure that we would get him, but but then, we did, which was great. And he's lovely to work with. But the others were really kind of new to me. Willa Fitzgerald, honestly, I didn't really know her. She'd been in a film, some horror film that Lucky McKee directed. And Lucky's an old friend of mine, so he recommended her. John Magaro had been in First Cow, and I knew Kelly Reichardt, and she recommended him to me. So I rely on sort of my network of other director friends to recommend people. Kathy Curtin, who we cast at the last second, because we'd had someone in the role of Lena for months and then didn't work out for scheduling reasons. And so we literally got her with 36 hours notice. She came straight from Werewolves Within, from that set, and just drove straight to our set. I think even before reading the script. And Vondi Curtis Hall, we only got about 2 days before he showed up. Part of it was a little bit of the anxiety about the pandemic already starting. Like LA people were kind of afraid to come out to New York, and likewise, we didn't want to be stuck with them, and not be able to get them back. So it kind of limited our pool of actors to New York actors, which is honestly great. I love New York actors because they all have these great theater backgrounds as well, and they want to do interesting work. But then once we all got out there, because we were all staying at the Silver Sands at the same motel, and then we'd wrap and still eat dinner together and have wine together and, talk about scenes and do rehearsals for the next day. That lent itself to this great chemistry among all the actors that is really, a treasure for a director to be able to have that opportunity.
Yeah, that's something that you can't ask for, and that's something you can't force them to do. Like if they don't have that click,
exactly,
it doesn't work. I know what you mean. So given the state of Hollywood these days, do you have any advice for modern filmmakers, people who are kind of in your boat? They have their film, they want to get into the film festivals. What would you recommend for them?
Well, I think one thing is that, there's a lot of pressure and tendency now to get into TV, get into episodic streaming, to be a showrunner as opposed to just a director. And the problem there is that, the world of episodics is really governed by the gatekeepers, the agents, the managers, the networks, the studios themselves. And you have to come in with a big package, and you can't just break in, as opposed to independent features. You can greenlight yourself. You can, get your friends together, shoot it on a micro budget, a mini budget, whatever budget you want. You can raise the money yourself, and you can say, yeah, we're going to make a movie. And then you've got a piece, whether it's a short film or a feature film, that is yours creatively, and your teams, or your friends or your families. And there is a very vibrant, there's thousands of film festivals around the world that will show the film. And so I think if you focus on I want to make this thing and I want to show it to audiences, then the festival circuit is really the way to go. I mean, on our film, 18 and a half, we played at 21 festivals on 8 countries. And we did it, during a pandemic. We kind of specifically went for festivals that were coming back with live screenings within the last year. And we kind of, somewhat by design, somewhat by accident, we wound up playing what I call trough festivals in the fall, in the trough between the Delta surge and the Omicron surge. And then in the spring, we played another round of trough festivals between Omicron and World War III. And, we were able to find those live festivals. And what was great was you would get audiences super appreciative, because for many of them, myself included, these were the first times coming back to theaters of any kind, and seeing a film in that communal experience and not just watching a Netflix show on your couch. So yeah, I think there's still a lot of great potential out there for any filmmaker to just make the thing you want to make, and don't do it to make money, but do it because creatively it's the thing you want to do.
I love how you put that. It does make a difference. I noticed that when you go to a movie theater and it's packed and everyone's having that same experience of the joy or the fear or whatever kind of movie they're watching, that group experience. A lot of movies I saw like 20 years ago, I still remember seeing in theaters just because that experience that we had, like Lord of the Rings, those movies.
Yeah, exactly.
Like 22 years ago now. So excellent point, because it really does last. I'm just wondering, out of all the ideas to go with, since you're not really a conspiracy theorist, why did you choose to make 18 and a half?
Well, the last film I did, which is called Bernard and Huey, the last day of shooting was in New York, and it was pretty much the day of the 2016 presidential election. And the next day I drove out to Shelter Island, which is at the tip of Long Island, to see the writer of that film, Jules Feiffer, because he'd written the script like 30 years earlier, but we were working together on it, and to show him dailies. Now, he was kind of most famous as a cartoonist for the Village Voice and won a Pulitzer Prize for his cartoons mainly about Nixon and Watergate. So inevitably, after Trump gets elected, we're talking about comparisons between Trump and Nixon and what could possibly go wrong. We survived, but he was trying to reassure us, we survived Nixon, we survived Watergate, in ways that we did and didn't, but we'll get through anything. And then that night I was staying, I took the ferry across from Shelter Island to the main part of Long Island, and stayed with my friend Terry Keefe, who owned this, he inherited this motel, the Silver Sands Motel, from his grandparents, who had built it in the 50s and 60s. He'd been running it for about 10 years, and he'd been using it. It's a working motel during the summer, and there'd been a lot of photo shoots, of like big high-end fashion shoots there, and music videos and episodic shows had shot there, but no one had ever shot a feature. And he said, "Hey, if you want to shoot a feature, we're closed in the winter. Everybody can stay out here." I was like, "Wow, this is an amazing location," And he was actually with me when we were talking to Pfeiffer. So we kind of had Nixon and Watergate in the brain, kind of all swirling around together with this amazing location. And Watergate is something I've kind of touched on in my writing. There was a chapter about it in a book I wrote 10 years ago, and I come from a political background. So it's something I've thought about, and I've known people tangentially involved with it over the years. So it was kind of an inevitable thing. And then I just got together with my writing partner, Daniel Moya. And then it was a matter of just coming up with a plausible scenario. So in doing the research, we realized that, there really were multiple offices in the Nixon White House that had these tape activated, or voice activated taping systems. Yeah. And there really are tapes of Nixon listening to and playing with the buttons. And so once I realized that was a real thing, then it gave us a plausible way into this fictional story of how Connie gets the missing 18.5-minute gap. So that was kind of the way in. I
love your enthusiasm too. I can tell you're really passionate about the subject too.
Well, I've been drinking a lot of coffee this morning. So.
Gotta get ready for the interview, right?
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
What would you say motivates you to make movies, especially in this time? Because you could have just gave up and said, "Screw it, I'm not going to make this movie." You know what I mean? Like you could have just washed your hands. Well,
I think the main thing is it's about the only thing I know how to do. I've written I've written a book, a couple books, Cheerful Subversive Guide to Independent Filmmaking, but I can't keep writing books about filmmaking if I don't occasionally make a film. So that's because I'm not, as a creative artist, small a artist, I'm not good at, I'm a decent writer. I'm not a very good musician. I'm okay at cinematography. I'm okay at editing, but the nice thing about directing a film is you need to know a little bit of all those different kind of art forms and kind of mush them together. And so that's kind of the one thing I know how to do now.
Thank you very much for that information. That's so interesting. I just love hearing the other side of it. That's a question I ask a lot of different people, because I've interviewed filmmakers now, and I like hearing different people's perspectives, because everyone has given a different answer, even though you all have this passion for films. I love that. So you wrote this yourself. I just have one more question. Do you have any advice for screenwriters nowadays?
Well, yeah. Well, I wrote it with my writing partner, Daniel Moya, who's a great writer. So I think my advice for screenwriters, it's tough out there because most people, myself included, you kind of want to have, here's my best advice is that when you're writing a script, either it's got to be something that you think you can sell, or it's something that you think you can make, or your friends can make on your own as an indie film. And I think maybe not as many screenwriters make that distinction when they're writing the screenplay, like, because the kind of the things that will inform and guide the way you write it are going to be different, whether it's one of those two things, or are you writing it as just a creative endeavor, for yourself, or to get better, for your next script. I mean, there's other reasons to write screenplays as well that are perfectly valid. But I think knowing why you're writing that specific screenplay is really key to then having fun and making it the best you can make it.
That's really good advice. That's awesome. I hadn't really thought of it like that before.
Yeah.
It's true. You got to think practically. You got to think about how can you make this film if you are going to make it.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, on 18 and a half, the script was written very specifically for that location, and then we found out that Daniel's aunt, worked at this diner that was just down the street from the Silver Sands. We're like, oh my God, that's 2 locations. Now we have to make a film, and, we had these 2 great locations to then write for. So it was a matter of kind of connecting the dots. And that's not the first film I've done where the location came first. That's not uncommon with indie film. So, if you're a screenwriter out there and you think you want to make this film for yourself and your friends to make, and you've got a great location, write the script for that, because locations are the most unpredictable thing in filmmaking. Like, cast you can budget for, crew you can budget for. Locations are either really expensive or free. And there's not a lot of in between.
Medium. Yeah, true.
Yeah.
It's really good advice. I think that's it for my questions. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this. I don't want to take too much time up.
Yeah, no, thank you. And, I'm glad you like the film. I mean, it's as you can see, it's not exactly a traditional horror film. So, but hopefully it's still, your audience will, or readers will respond to it in the same way you did. So, I'm glad you liked it.
It's very unique. It's very original. I like how it's not just your typical political thriller, because you're not in Washington. You're out in this cottage country, and there's different people everywhere, and you're really suspicious because they say and do things. And you're like, wait, that was kind of messed up. Like, something's with that person. You know what I mean? I didn't even guess. I'm not going to say what happens, but I didn't guess what happened at the end. I thought that was very clever.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you again for your time. Before we go, tell people, like, where can they find you on social media and when your film will be available? Like,
Yeah. So the film is coming out in theaters only for at least the first month or so, starting May 27th in select cities, which is LA, New York, Omaha, and a couple other places. It's playing in the theater in Maine on May 27th. But then it expands a little bit more on June 3rd. So check your local listings for that. And then, but if you still haven't seen it in a theater, or you don't want to go to theaters, starting July 5th, it'll be available on video on demand in throughout North America. And then July 11th in the UK and Ireland, it's coming out on video on demand. So, and then the Blu-ray and DVDs coming out in September. It's probably going to be on some airlines in August. So eventually it'll be hopefully everywhere, but we're starting in theaters and really making a commitment to bring folks back to theaters if they want to come. And if they don't want to, that's cool too.
Go to the theater, people. You heard of.
Yeah. Oh, and then social media. So the website for the film is 18.5movie.com, and then social media, it's either 18.5 or 18.5 movie on Twitter, Facebook. If I can figure out how to get my TikTok back going on there, and Instagram, and I'm usually D Mirvish or Dan Mirvish at most of these things as well.
Outstanding. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to sit here and talk with me. That was a great conversation. Do you have any final words for the audience before we go?
No, just, make films if you want to make films, or be creative if you want to be creative. And otherwise, we just hope you enjoy our film, 18.5.
I really recommend it, people. It's been great talking with you, Dan. Thank you again.
All right.
Have a
Great
good
talking to you, Chris. All right. Cheers, man. All right. Thanks. Bye.
In case you haven't heard, I'm a film critic on HorrorBuzz.com, and I make frequent appearances on HorrorBuzz Live, their YouTube channel. So I'll make sure to put links below for that. Until next time, I'm Mr. Flickster, and I just love motion pictures. Have a great day. Mr. Flickster.